Hello friends, this is Jim here with Science Talk. I have an interesting report to share with you concerning marine microbes. This is a report that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And what this deals with is that the marine microbes may help exacerbate ocean warming. Now, if you have warmer air, we know that means warmer oceans, at least for sea surface temperatures. And the marine microbes in the warmer oceans could mean yet warmer air. In other words, this is another positive feedback mechanism that could be taking place, certainly not really accounted for previously. So, U.S. scientists say marine microbes are the cause of yet another potentially positive feedback that could accelerate global warming. Okay, the oceans warm, the marine microbial life might start to pump yet more CO2 into the atmosphere because they're becoming more active and they're microbes. Now, we're talking microbes that could be, say detritivores, they could be decomposers, whatever, and part of their metabolic processes is the creation of CO2. Okay? Not necessarily talking about phytoplankton, which are producers. And by the way, and I'm going to be having reports on this coming soon about how much warmer ocean surface temperatures are. As you warm up the surface layers of the ocean, there is the danger that what used to be a seasonal pycnocline may extend longer than usual and or become semi-permanent or permanent. Now, if that were to happen, phytoplanktons need nutrients, not just sunlight energy. They need nutrients in a dissolved form to do their photosynthesizing to increase their biomass. And increasing biomass usually typically means increasing their numbers. Recall, and I've done some videos on this, go check it out in my video library, you need two events for productivity to occur in aquatic systems, freshwater or marine. You need some sort of mixing, some sort of overturn of the water column to mix things up, get the nutrients from the bottom up into the surface water or into the photic zone where light levels reach. And then you need some sort of stratification to stabilize the water column so that the phytoplanktons are kept in the photic zone and they can do their thing. Well, usually as the season progresses, temperatures cool down, the pycnocline, thermocline, if it's a freshwater system, breaks down, you get the mixing and so on, and then you get the rejuvenation, as it recycles through. Now, if you got this layer that's always going to be warmer, you're going to inhibit any mixing from below. Well, the phytoplankton are going to use up the nutrients. And if they use up the nutrients, they're going to die eventually. And if they die, the zooplankton that feed upon the phytoplankton, their numbers start to decrease. The larger zooplankton that feed on the smaller zooplankton, the little fish, the crabs, the larger fish, etc., etc., the whole ecosystem can collapse. And there are some signs of this taking place in various spots around the world. So, and here's the other thing. Why is that important? Phytoplanktons contribute a tremendous amount of oxygen to the atmosphere. Some 50 to 80%. Phytoplanktons die, we are imperiling ourselves. Keep that in mind. So, what's happening here? Well, these microbes could potentially add more CO2, further adding to the warming. Everything's tied together, be it atmosphere, oceans, the cryosphere, glaciers, ice caps, what have you, rocks even, algae, forests, grasslands, anything. It's all connected. One big, massive, complex system. And then you have the bacteria. By biomass, bacteria, the prokaryotes, have more biomass than all the eukaryotic organisms on the planet put together. Bacteria are found everywhere. And for quite some time, bacteria, because it's harder to study, have really not been given as much consideration in the analysis of what's going on in the climate. And we're now starting this. We're seeing some studies doing just that, analyzing the role of bacteria, and the results are disconcerting, needless to say. So, what basically, scientists went aboard some various research vessels, and they looked in detail at processes in highly productive waters off the South American coast, not in El Nino's situation, and at the more or less barren waters south of the equator that cycle in a set of currents known as the South Pacific Gyre. Now, I did a video called Rotating Systems, and I explain atmospheric rotating system, high and low pressure system, as well as oceanic gyres. It's a lengthy video, but if you have not seen it, please check it out, because in that video I explain why oceanic gyres in the middle of the ocean tend to be biological deserts. A lot of detail. I also discuss Ekman transport, Ekman onshore transport, Ekman spiral, and so forth, along with the Coriolis. It's a lengthy video, but I think it's quite informative, and it's over an hour. You don't have to watch it in one sitting. Break it down into chapters, if you will, but it will explain why, when I say the less barren water south of the equator, the South Pacific Gyre, it will explain why that is. So what were these scientists doing? They were trying to estimate, what the plankton were doing, their life cycle, how with their productivity, then what happens when they die and eventually sink down through the water column all the way to the ocean floor. So this is all part of trying to understand better the planet's carbon budget. Our knowledge is still lacking certain areas. So climate scientists think that the oceans absorb around 1/4 of all the extra CO2 that have been burnt as a result of human burning fossil fuels. Yeah, oceans absorbing CO2 have saved our bacon thus far. But with that, ocean acidification is increasing. The lysocline, and I did a video, the video entitled Ocean Becoming More Acidic. At the end of that, I explain what lysocline is all about. Lysocline is getting shallower, which means that organisms are finding it more difficult to maintain their shells, or the shells, what protects them, is dissolving literally around from them, increasing their risk of mortality. So plankton produce about 40 to 50 billion tons of organic carbon as they undergo primary productivity before they die, filtered through the water column. Microbes begin to act on those dead phytoplankton, and they begin the process of decay, recycling the carbon into the atmosphere. This is where it's coming from. Somewhere between 8 billion, 10 billion tons of phytoplankton tissue will sink below 100 meters. And as it goes deeper and deeper into the ocean water column, there's less and less oxygen, where the decay will eventually stop. Now, what happens is you have organisms at depth that wait for, and we call this marine snow, by the way. They wait for the stuff to trickle down, and they eat it. That's basically their food source. Or if you have a dead whale, when its carcass reaches the bottom, it's banquet time, and you just see a whole bunch of organisms coming from kilometers around to take advantage of this large pile of food. When the dead plankton, when it reaches the ocean floor, they could be there for centuries. But if you put more heat, it could alter the balance of recycling and hence long-term storage. Now keep in mind, you're taking these organisms from the surface, you're bringing it down to the ocean floor. That's sequestering the carbon. Now we're seeing processes that implies that the amount of carbon sequestration is being reduced and that carbon is being recycled into the atmosphere. One other point I want to make about the issue with warming the ocean surface. As you know, the solubility of gases decreases with an increase in temperature. At some point, the oceans will not be able to absorb the extra CO2 humans are putting into the atmosphere. And at some point, it continues to the temperatures continue to rise. The CO2 might actually outgas back into the atmosphere. So this whole notion, let the ocean absorb the excess CO2, up to a point where warming the ocean surface is going to reduce the solubility, and at some point, and actually whatever CO2 is in the ocean water, it's going to be released back into the atmosphere. So there's some stuff happening here. And remember, the oceans cover at least 70% of the world's surface area. So Dr. Robert Anderson of Columbia University, Lamont Doherty, one of the authors, Lamont Doherty, Wally Broca's old stomping grounds. The results are telling us that warming will cause faster recycling of carbon in many areas, and that means less carbon will reach the deep ocean and get stored. So the concern is that as the oceans warm, oxygen low zones will increase and expand because, again, solubility decreases. Not just only the solubility of CO2 will decrease, but the solubility of O2. As the surface waters warm, the microbial activity could accelerate, releasing ever more carbon into the atmosphere, in which case the world would warm more swiftly. Now, is this conclusive? No. I'll be honest, this is not conclusive. It's preliminary, but is of concern and does warrant further research to collect further data and to see if this hypothesis is going to be borne out. Now, oxygen depletion in the ocean has been a concern of oceanographers and climate scientists for some time. So we have another kind of double-edged sword here. A warmer world, microbial scavengers and recyclers work ever harder, but not just only on land. So, there you have it. Another concern here, the role of microbial activities. Now, here's another little interesting thing to think about. We have the polar ice as it retreats, as glaciers retreat. Okay. We know about the permafrost thawing out, releasing methane. That's because of organic microbial activity on the organic material in the permafrost. Right? And we know that this is increasing carbon in the atmosphere, creating a positive feedback loop, further warming, etc. We've discussed this numerous times before. But here's the other thing. Right? I've talked about albedo reducing. Albedo is reflection of sun energy back into space off ice surfaces. If you got open water, the heat is absorbed. Well, if you got the land ice melting, you've got rocks. Rocks are going to absorb sun energy. I'll give you an example. Every year, come about late March or so, in my driveway, which has been packed down by snow from the previous winter, I basically create a large rectangular area, not where the wheels of my truck will go, but right in the middle of the driveway, I cut out this large patch of packed down snow right down to the bare rock. And what that does is that bare rock starts absorbing the energy, starts, through radiation, transfers that heat energy throughout the rest of the driveway, and my driveway melts out much faster. Where if I didn't touch it, it would be like several weeks further, and then it becomes mushy and slushy and all that kind of stuff for it to totally clear out. This way, it melts out earlier, quicker, and sooner, and also with sublimation, being a dry area, that also helps. But I have found that doing that, my driveway melts out much faster. So, in addition to the microbial activity, I've already touched upon this, oxygen levels will decrease as the oceans warm up. That puts stresses on organisms. I'll leave you with a final comment here. Our findings, this is from the scientists involved in this study, our findings imply that climate warming will result in reduced ocean carbon storage due to expanding oligotrophic gyres, but opposing effects on ocean carbon storage from expanding suboxic waters will require modeling and future work to disentangle. Okay, translation. More research needs to be done. Okay? Disentangle, basically tease apart. Now, suboxic means low-level oxygenated waters. Oligotrophic. Oligotrophy refers to nutrient-poor areas versus eutrophy, which is nutrient-rich areas. Eutrophication, right, where you had all these like detergents that add all these nutrients. And then you have bacteria go on town, something to the point of depleting oxygen. But when you talk about eutrophication, all the fertilizer runoff from agricultural practices into water systems, and boom, there's a little bit of a phytoplankton bloom. Well, oligotrophic is nutrient poor. So someone says, oh, look at the pretty crystal clear blue lake. Someone says that to me, and I said, and I will show you an oligotrophic lake. A eutrophic lake, kind of bluish greenish. The visibility is not that great. It's definitely not crystal clear because there's a lot of nutrients in it. So oligotrophic gyres, these are gyres that are poor in nutrients. Just to break down what the meaning of the term. And that goes back to my point about subtropic oceanic gyres in the middle of the oceans being basically biological deserts. Again, check out that video, Rotating Systems. So in other words, anyway, this is yet another parameter that needs to be understood better and then incorporate to improve our already pretty good models, but hey, always looking to improve things. And this is why, when you hear people talking about geoengineering, why it's a fool's errand. Geoengineering is never, ever going to work. There's just too many things we don't know. They already tried to, let's throw iron in the oceans. And they did that twice, and that was a whopping failure. And I've done other videos where I've shared some of the geoengineering schemes and how ludicrous they are. And they are. And that doesn't mean they're going to be less ludicrous in the future. The geoengineering will never work. Thank you for your time. Hey friends, this is Jim reminding you to subscribe and share my videos. Also, don't forget to click the bell so that you know when I drop a video in. And I'm also asking for you to please support the work that I do by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Details in the description box below. Thank you for your continued support.